welcome to the second episode of the Overlanding podcast, the world's only dedicated podcast to vehicle-dependent travel, as far as we know at least. If anyone knows any different, please do let us know. The podcast is hosted by myself, Andy Smith, along with my wife, Emma Smart. And throughout this series, we'll be meeting the adventurous people who have chosen to travel the world by bicycle, motorcycle, car and truck. The aim of the podcast is to discover what motivates people to embark on life-changing journeys, why people choose to travel in this manner, and to hear some incredible stories along the way. We'll hear stories of high drama, tales of amazing hospitality, and enough anecdotes to keep you coming back for more. In this episode, we had the pleasure of chatting with Stephen Stewart and his wife Michele at the annual Adventure Overland Show in historical Stratford-upon-Avon. Stephen has some incredible overland stories dating back to 1969 and has visited over 110 countries, mostly overland in old Land Rovers, by camper van and by expedition truck. Okay, so let's not waste any more time and jump straight into the conversation. Out of these 5 locations, where would you prefer this interview to take place? A. Near a babbling brook in a lush green valley. In a little tent on a windy mountain top. On a warm beach with the sea lapping at your feet. Round a nighttime campfire in a forest. Or deep in a tropical jungle.
You want the beach, don't you?
No, I was going to say campsite in the... a campfire. Where were you going to say?
A campfire on the beach.
I'll go for the campfire on the beach.
Well, was on the beach in the forest, actually.
Well, the campfire is obviously the best place to meet other overlanders,
Okay.
chat, share
Yeah,
stories.
We'll go for a campfire.
It's a good one. Let's just take a minute to appreciate the noise of the campfire. Nice. Okay. We're at the Adventure Overland Show. We've just bumped into some incredible people who've got an incredible truck, and we'd just like to meet them. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
I'm Stephen Stewart.
I'm Michele Stewart.
And why might we be chatting to you today?
God knows, you must have been passing. We've done quite a bit of overlanding, and we have a fairly showy truck, so that's probably what stopped you. Yeah,
it's certainly a nice truck. I had a look at the route on the outside of your vehicle, and it's really nice because it's data specific as well. And the thing that really caught my eye was an overland route through Africa in the 70s. And that I always find interesting. People who've clearly had overlanding in their blood for a long time. So could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, let's go back to the start. My first overlanding trip, which isn't on the map, and I'd never left the UK before. The first time I ever left the UK was to drive to India. In 1969 with 499 other people.
Okay. On some kind of hippie pilgrimage?
No. You could call it that, but it was not at all. It was much, much higher level than that. It was organised by a gentleman called Colonel Lionel Gregory, who thought it'd be a jolly good idea if he took some fine upstanding British people to India to improve Commonwealth relations.
Okay.
So he persuaded the then chairman of Bedford Dupel to lend him 20 brand new Bedford coaches. He persuaded his friends, Philip and Liz, to sponsor, or at least to have their name on the side of it. And then he set about organising 20 coaches from 20 universities, basically, with 3 teams in each coach to drive to India, overland. He arranged for the London Transport to train the 60 drivers to get PSV licences. He arranged for the army to train the 60 cooks. He arranged for Pi to train the 40 odd radio operators, and so on. Everything was, and he drove at the front. And we drove in convoy to India. We stopped off in Yugoslavia, as your GPS, and on the night that the Americans landed on the moon.
Oh, wow.
But nobody in Yugoslavia knew about it, and so we were in the campsite listening on our coach radios and pointing up at the moon and trying to explain.
Nothing.
Didn't know it.
Wow.
He had a select group of friends So when we got to Iran, we camped in the Shah's private gardens.
Yeah. What year again? 69?
Oh,
69.
pre-revolution.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Amazing. Wow.
And it was all in the papers, and that we were the Shah's personal guests.
Yeah.
Which meant that if you were downtown and you were recognised, people would pull up, perhaps with the assistance sometimes of the police, and they'd say, "Take these people back to the Shah." It was an amazing experience. And I met the Shah, at least in passing, and he set up a 500 place for 500 people to camp in his personal botanical garden, which is rather like camping in queue and closing it.
This is in Tehran?
This is in
In
Tehran.
the north
yeah.
of Tehran?
Yes.
It's the palace we've been to. We've actually visited the same place. The gardens are huge and stunning.
Well, he closed them.
Right.
That's
And
amazing.
he set up a small 12-bed hospital just in case we needed it.
Amazing.
In Afghanistan, after we'd crossed the border, we parked all our coaches in a circle in the desert, and lots of people came down on horseback and rode round and round, firing in the air, who may or may not have known Greg in a previous life. And when we got to India, we had tea and cucumber sandwiches with Indira Gandhi.
Amazing. Whoa.
The whole thing
That's
was
incredible.
and this-
How long did that take, that journey?
I could be wrong. I think it was about 12 or 15 weeks.
Right.
We went out and we brought back a contingent from India who was spread out amongst the various coaches.
Yeah. And is that trip documented anywhere?
He wrote a book called Crying Drums,
okay.
that trip was Comex 3. He ran 13 of them.
Wow.
Comex 3 was the biggest one. Comex 2 had a catastrophic accident in Yugoslavia, which involved there was a bus crash and a coach, a mobile crane ran into one of the coaches and beheaded some of the people in the coach.
Yes.
And it was blamed by the Yugoslav authorities on the driver of the coach.
Yeah.
And the Road Research Laboratory got involved, and everybody got involved, and they had to go back, or they volunteered to go back and be tried, and they were found guilty, and eventually they got a pardon and various other things. It was a long and traumatic. I wasn't on that one, I don't know the
Luckily
details.
you were on Comex 3.
I was on Comex 3, but he ran another one. Comex 3 was the biggest,
Right.
but he ran up to Comex 13, which went in various places over the Commonwealth.
Yeah. And then when you arrived in India, how long were you in India?
In India, we were in India for a couple of weeks, and we took part in a cultural festival at the Rabindra Rangshala just outside Delhi, which I think it was a stadium seated about 10,000. And there was a huge sort of youth camp with lots of Indians and people from different areas of India who put on cultural shows, and we were expected to put on cultural shows. So the Oxford and Cambridge coach put on Shakespeare, and the Liverpool coach put on, a Beatles tribute, because the Beatles were extremely big at the time.
Wow.
And the Yorkshire coach, we put on some strange play. It wasn't a mummers play, but it was something of that ilk. It was a historical play which involved a ram's head and various other things, but luckily we had some folk singers who were quite good as well.
And at this point, how old were you in 1969? It was
21.
21. Okay, and obviously not having travelled outside the UK before, that must have had a massive, profound change on your life, right?
It did, yes.
Yeah.
Totally life-changing.
Totally, yes.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. That's an amazing story.
But then what happened after that? Did you not go to a mission hospital?
Well, then I'd already applied to do VSO, but for various reasons VSO lost my paperwork, etc. So I did a sort of private VSO, and I ended up in a mission hospital in South Africa, in the Transkei, which was then a black area of South Africa. The pass laws worked in reverse there, well, slightly in reverse. And there, after a year or so there, I bought an old Land Rover and drove it back, but because it was South African registered, which was not much approved of, so I could only drive it up as far as Mombasa, and then shipped it over to Bombay as was, and then back through central Afghanistan, through Afghanistan. And when we got into Afghanistan, which was and is still a lovely country, we went into the tourist information in Kabul and said, I know there's a road around the north to Mazar-e Sharif, and I know there's a road around the south through Kandahar, but we've got a map here that says there's a road over the middle. Can we go? And he said, when do you want to go? And we said, tomorrow. And he said, can I come with you? So he closed down tourist information, and we were travelling in a Land Rover and the French couple in another Land Rover, and we drove right over the top through Chekcharan, through past the Buddhas of Bamiyan, before they were destroyed, and then there's a beautiful lake whose name I'm now trying to remember, and then off over the top through Chekcharan and down again. And at the end of that, when I finally got back to the UK, I thought that was pretty cool. So I then went to Encounter Overland, who used to run these overland trips, and said, you should employ me.
And they did.
The arrogance of youth. Yes, they did.
Well, you don't get if you don't ask.
And so then I worked for them, and that's what the trip that's on the map is one of the trips. Because I did it twice, both times, in fact, from South Africa, Joburg, back to London.
And in that particular role, I presume it was a big truck with loads of passengers?
It was, it was driver and co-driver, 2 trucks together, Bedford RLs, ex-Green Goddesses, in fact, with coach seats in the back, with passengers mucking in, basically. It was fair. I mean, we were the more expensive end of the market. We almost always got there, which was quite unusual for the time. There were lots of trips that did magic bus from London to India, some of which only got there about half the time. So we were definitely at the sort of top end of the market. And Encounter Overland later was bought by Dragoman, and they're still in business.
Yeah, they're still in business, And
in fact, I think they run Encounter as one of their brands within Dragoman.
And at that time, I don't want to get too techie on the paperwork, but did paperwork exist then? Well, was it relatively easy to do those kind of trips?
It was different. There wasn't the biggest problem on I did London to Johannesburg to London and London Kathmandu, but on the Johannesburg to London, the problem was that most of the people you were picking up had been in South Africa, and that was basically a no-no to many of the countries north of there. So the first thing you had to do was to disinfect their passports. The first country you get to, you take them all into their own embassies and they get a new passport. And that worked for many of them. In other cases, you took them into the post office and you bought stamps and you stuck postage stamps all over their other ones, and then got the place to frank them, because at that point quite a lot of countries made you paid for their visas with postage stamps, which they put in your passport and franked. But you could use it. You could just ask to
camouflage.
Do it. To camouflage.
Cover up a visa. Wow.
The best one were the Swiss, because you went into, say, the German embassy and you got a new passport. That's fine. It was issued in wherever it was. The Swiss one, just before they handed you the passport, a big stamp in the front which said this passport was issued on the basis of previous passport issued in South Africa. Which of course, so you hand it back to them and say, "I'd like another new passport, please." And so you had to buy 2.
That's really interesting. So from that point then, how long did you work there? You worked there for
I think about 2 years.
2 years.
I did several trips up Africa and a couple to and from Kathmandu. I mean, the biggest, most difficult parts of this trip was Zaire, which was mud, basically, largely mud, and many sort of unrecovered bridges and things.
Like this. And at that time, was there much conflict for any of those countries, or were they relatively safe?
Well, we obviously avoided. We went through Uganda when it was becoming difficult. And there were problems in Zaire. There were lots of police checks in Zaire. Some of them real, some of them not real. So that could be a bit of a problem, making the guess as to whether these people, you should actually stop for these people, whether they really did have guns and fuel. I made a mistake, yes. And they did. They not only did they have guns, they also had fuel for their vehicle and therefore could chase me. So that was
pulled you out at that point.
Yes,
face in the mud.
Yes, that was annoying.
One way of describing it.
But no, that was, and then we, Algeria was fine at that point. I mean, you could go crossing the Sahara, though the border between Niger and Algeria was very iffy, and there were people who got stuck on that border. They left Niger and didn't get into Algeria and didn't have visas to get back to Niger, and they got stuck in no man's land because there was about 20 or 30 miles gap.
Right.
and you stopped and gave them water and tried to
Yeah,
follow
help
up
them
because
out.
they don't. Well, somebody else had taken their passport somewhere, to try and get them a visa.
Yeah.
And you did your best to
Just
help
had
them.
to sit it out. Wow,
And
that's
then
incredible.
you had problems with malaria, didn't you? With some of them, quite nasty.
Oh, some of our people got some of the people got malaria, so we had to get them into hospital in Nigeria.
Interesting. So, would you say that the challenges you kind of face now, would you say the challenges are similar to the same kind of challenges you had back then? Or has technology, medical advancement, the paperwork, has all that stuff improved? Do you think it was easier back then or easier now?
Well, of course it helps if you are immortal, which of course I was back then. And as you grow older, you become less immortal.
Yeah.
So I don't know. No, I mean there were paperwork hassles and things, but you could pick your route through there, and it was, if not well travelled, there were companies going down through Africa fairly.
But the information wasn't out there, even since you did your first build in 2000. The information, and with the internet, makes so much more accessible.
But not
even in the last few years, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Stephen's always had a very comprehensive website, haven't you? But now, lots of people are doing it. It's just fine.
Yeah. I mean, then if you wanted, to get information, you found somebody who had a telex machine.
Yeah.
And you paid them to send you send a telex back to the UK because that was the most reliable way of doing it.
Yeah.
But in fact, the airlines used to have a separate telex system from everybody else, and if you were really desperate, you went into the airlines and you asked them to send a telex, and they would say, well, that'll cost you £4, and it'll be there in 3 days. And you'd say, can I have it earlier? And they'd say, £8, we'll have it there tomorrow. £20, and they'd say, yes, it's there.
Yeah.
But this was the magic of telex.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. So during this period, do you have any brothers and sisters? What did your family think of you undertaking these travels? Are the rest of your family kind of adventurous?
My sister's fairly adventurous. She looked after animals,
Zoo
animals. But she'd also been out in Africa when they were collecting animals.
Yeah.
And so yes, she was it. My brother, not a great traveller.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, so let's skip forward then. Once you'd finished working for this overlanding company, was there a long period?
I then did a proper job in the computer industry.
In where? Sorry, computer.
In the computer industry. But my company was in London and moved to Milton Keynes, and I decided not to go with them, and had another trip down. I got an old Land Rover then and built a roof tent because you couldn't buy them.
Yeah.
No, I sewed a roof tent. And went round the Sahara for a few months, and then came back and looking for a job, decided, and then went back and joined the same company in Milton Keynes. And stayed with them for a bit.
Okay.
Well, for the rest of your working life.
The rest of my working life, yes.
So, but you said that certainly the travel bug was kind of still in there, or clearly, because we're in this situation now. So let's skip forward again then to your.
Well, in about I think it's 2000, I decided that I would find out if I really wanted to do Overland again. So I actually went as a passenger on Encounter Overland.
Okay.
To Egypt. And decided after 3 weeks that yes, I wanted to do it again, and no, I didn't want to do it as a passenger.
But you had previously bought a Mervy for a little time, hadn't you?
Yeah, I had
done a
had
bit
a
of
camper,
touring in an ordinary camper van type thing.
And got it stuck on grass and thought, wet grass, front wheel drive.
Yeah, I've seen that in action.
Yeah. But luckily there were a line of chalets, and they all had doormats outside, so I gathered together 8 doormats and got off and put the ragged remains of the doormats back.
That's often our morning amusement on campsites, isn't it? Watching the camper van.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. So then, you've clearly got the bug back then. So then, what did you do? Did you
I decided
plan one big trip, or undertake smaller trips again?
I decided that I wasn't actually thinking of trips particularly. I was thinking, I've got to have a truck.
Okay.
I've got to have a Unimog stage.
Yeah.
Because everybody goes, or many people go through the phase. You've got to have a Unimog.
Yeah.
Which is it's gross overkill. But great fun. So I found a source of second-hand ex-German Army Unimogs. I bought a Unimog, and I got somebody else to build basically a plywood box on the back, and then converted it and that took from about 2000 to 2002.
Yeah.
And then got linked up with a number of people from the English-speaking part of a French club, the Silk Route Club, who were arranging a trip to China, which is somewhat complex because of what you have to do in China and travel in groups
With
and
a
have
guide.
guides and all that. It doesn't make sense to do on your own, because you're going to end up paying. So we as a group, which includes the next one along and several other people, we went in 2002 overland to China with 5 English-speaking, in fact one of them Canadian, and another group of 5 French-speaking, part of the French-speaking club, and we actually met up on the borders of China.
Okay, and your route that time, you came down to Greece, Turkey, Iran, maybe?
Turkey, Iran,
and then up through the stands.
Yes, through the stands. Yes. Not Tajikistan, maybe. But through the others. And up, into China and then Kashgar and across. With when they used to have the Triumphal Arch, there was a beautiful archway which apparently is gone now. Where you queued up and your guide literally had to be on the opposite side of the line before you were allowed to cross.
That's interesting.
And your guide, who's your minder. Our first guide was completely. He was a very nice chap, but he had no sort of experience or knowledge of driving or roads or distances, and would happily announce, oh, there's no problem, we'll get to wherever it is, a couple of hours, but sort of didn't rate it for sort of 5 foreign vehicles. It could take you 12 hours in the middle of the night, and but he was able and willing, but not very competent. And eventually, when we got to Beijing, we talked to the people who'd supplied the guide, and they changed him for somebody who was equally incompetent, but quite unpleasant. And we wish we'd stuck with Patrick.
Better the devil you know.
That's interesting. And then throughout this whole time, then those countries, did they kind of fulfil your expectations of what you were getting into and what you got back into, and were you happy to be on the road?
Oh again? Yes. I mean, we had no major problems. One of the French vehicles was involved in a serious road accident. Nobody was thinking, but their vehicle was more or less written off. And one of our people, for various reasons, had to suddenly go back to Canada, as they had to ship out from Hong Kong. But apart from that, it all worked. We nearly didn't make it in Tibet because we'd had to. You have to give your route and have it approved by what amounts to the secret police and and stick more or less to it. Anyway, the route which had been agreed was more or less impassable. We got to one point, and I, in the Unimog, left the group and drove down this road, and I couldn't get past the Land Cruisers stuck in the mud. Because they blocked the road, and I could see going round the valley. There were dozens of people stuck in the mud, and so I turned around as best I could in the Unimog and came back and said, "We are not. I am not going down there. You certainly are not going down there." So we had to go back to a place whose name escapes me now, and our guide had to negotiate with the powers that be for us to go another way. There was another way. And we never fully understood why they wanted us to go that way. And so we had to back up and go the other way. And things got very late and they got frustrating. And we were on 90-day visas with a threat of $500 a day fine for exceeding it. And of course we were going up fairly high, 4,500 metres to cross over because we were going to come down into Nepal. And they closed the pass, of course, some date in the future. So it all got somewhat fraught. But we did actually make it out into Nepal before.
And the Unimog at that altitude, do you have any problems? Did it smoke a lot? Or
yes, it smoked all the time.
Did you lose a lot? Did you lose power at that altitude?
Most of it, but but it kept on going. And connected to that, we had somebody not quite at that point, but who had a Mitsubishi, and one morning they tried to start it, and the light came on they'd never seen before. and it made no attempt to start. And eventually, this was after lots of phone calls to back to Canada and then back to Japan. It turned out that basically it had no calibration data for this altitude because it was certified for California, and there is nowhere in California at this altitude.
4,500 metres.
So it said no. Luckily, they directly or indirectly, Mitsubishi came back and said, disconnect the green-yellow wire and join it to the pink wire and start it, and it will think you're thing, and then put it back and don't stop the engine until you're down to 3,000 metres.
Yeah. It can always be a little daunting when you reach those altitudes. We drove the Pamir, which is the highest we've been to, which was 4,650, I think. And we weren't sure what our vehicle was going to do at that altitude, and it smoked a lot. We lost a lot of power, but thankfully our vehicle's quite old, really basic, and we had a little warning light that popped on, but that was it. As soon as we kind of descended again, the warning light went off.
Well, so, my MOG was 1970 something. It had no lights, no nothing. it just smoked.
Yeah.
But what the Chinese had insisted, I mean, we were quite a mixed group because there were, in a very mixed collection of vehicles, standard Euromobile campervans and things. Yeah. One of the French ones broke his front drive, his constant velocity joints, and we had to put him on the back of a truck. He got over faster than we did.
That's a good photo, isn't
it? Yes,
and ran on the back of a truck.
But the Chinese had equipped us with an oxygen cylinder in case some of us needed it.
Oh, really?
But they had, when I asked them, show me how it works, they had no idea how it worked at all. So I thought when we were up at about 4,000 metres, it'd be a good idea to see how this thing worked. So I unpacked it and read the Chinese instructions, which of course made no sense, but there was a certain amount of playing around. I eventually got this thing mask on to get it to work. And it was only when you did that you realised how debilitated you'd be. And so there's me strutting up and down, because I can now walk 200 metres quite fast. And you become a bit like a drug addict, saying, "You must try this. You must try this."
And other than, well, you clearly hadn't noticed the effects of the altitude, and it's very easy when you're in a vehicle to actually climb really quite quickly because well, I'm not going to stop. I don't need to stop. I can get there.
Luckily, we had been fairly cautious in climbing, and we had done our very best not to sleep at the highest altitudes.
Because I think the kind of symptoms can be quite dramatic sometimes. A lot of people hallucinate. It's really quite drug-like symptoms to the altitude sickness.
From what I've read, so I think we were all a bit naive, but from what I've read later, I mean, sort of super fitness is no guarantee.
No.
And we was not that we were, and it was were super fit. I mean, we were overtaken by cyclists.
Those guys are next level. They're incredible.
We saw two going up to Alaska, didn't we? Yeah.
Wow. But I think you mentioned the word naivety then. I think naivety is actually an overlander's best friend, because with naivety comes the fact that you end up in odd situations or you end up in interesting situations because you don't know any better. So okay, over all these trips then, that'll lead me on to the next question. Have you ever found yourself, what's the oddest situation you've been in? Because we've certainly come across a few odd ones on our travels, and I think you must have some good ones in there.
Well, going a long way back to when I worked for Encounter, I had one passenger stab another one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
That's a relationship.
Wow.
Yes, that was a relationship. I don't think I shall go into details of who stabbed who and why, but it was long and messy. But when you sign up for those trips, you fill a form in that says, it's at the absolute discretion of the leader to throw you off.
Yeah.
Well, it is.
And they were
There's a television show. It's an awful television show called Coach Trip, where that guy takes a it sounds like that was a Coach Trip on steroids. I think that.
Well, on one of our group trips, the one that we went to Mongolia and Siberia, we were approached by a film crew. I've forgotten where it was, but somewhere I can't remember now. But early on in the journey, just out of Europe, who wanted to film us, you see, and they thought, we'd say yes, And we sort of went through this with them exactly. And what they wanted, of course, was drama. They wanted the whole thing to fail. They wanted everybody to fall out with each other. And they were really very put out when we said, no, we decided you would not be an asset to us, tagging along with the camera and the microphone, taking each person around the truck. You know what he said about it?
Yeah, trying to provoke some drama,
That's
reality TV.
So we didn't do that.
That's good. So from that trip then, was that a round trip?
That was a round trip. Well, yes, that was a round trip, but it had to be different ways round because we actually shipped back from India. Because we needed to avoid going through Iran.
And did you have fun with the Indian customs? Was the hard work you put in 1969 with the bureaucracy, I should imagine, was still...
The same.
It was a Unimog, and it was going to be. We'd arranged in Mumbai to have it to ship it on a flat rack, a container without walls, and we got all the paper. I mean, great acres of paperwork, and they brought this flat rack up and put it down, and there's a sort of 60 centimetre step, and they put it in front of the Unimog and said, just drive on there. And I said, well, I can, but I would quite like a ramp. And they all looked at each other. So they then went to the nearest container, as far as I could see, opened it up, and with a forklift took out some great big, sort of 8-foot square plates of something, and they put it down as a ramp and said, drive up there. And I said, what is it? And they said, it's steel plates. No problem, drive up there. So I drove up, and it broke in the middle. But I could still drive up the biscuit, so I drove up. So they just picked it up and put it back in the container, now with great big tyre tracks all the way up it. I have no idea what it was, but it was certainly not
somebody's
steel.
possession.
Yeah.
But you can imagine at the other end when they get this,
how on earth did that happen?
hardwood, expensive hardwood sheets or whatever it was in there.
Yeah.
They've got my tyre tracks right up it. That's broken in half.
That's interesting. Okay, so then next trip. Another trip after that?
Well, after the China trip, we then did a trip across through and into Mongolia. At that point, this was 2004, it was quite difficult to enter Mongolia other than north of Ulaanbaatar. If you were a foreign vehicle, you had to come down from Ulaanbaatar, and you could only go basically in and out that way. Well, one of our group had, somehow, I don't know, found that the Mongolians intended to open the western border, and had persuaded the Mongolian embassy in London to give us a piece of paper that's saying we were extra special people and we should be allowed in through this thing before it was open. Anyway, as we approached the border, people kept stopping us and saying, "Are you with Ewan McGregor?" And we thought, why would we?
You didn't even know who he was.
We didn't know. We didn't know who he was. Anyway, as we approached the border, Ewan McGregor was the first one through that border. We were the second one through the border. And we drove, because we were, again, I was in the Unimog, but everybody else was in, relatively ordinary, in some cases, front-wheel drive, two-wheel drive, Euromobil camper van. And so we picked a route that wasn't too bad, and we made it to Ulaanbaatar.
But still plenty of water crossings, I'm guessing.
We'd done our homework of timing and things, so it wasn't that bad. But no, there was a certain amount of watercraft. I mean, we went through the centre, and before that, we tried to get information on road conditions in Mongolia, and we bought all the maps you could get hold of. And they were all pretty bad. And so what we did is we documented out with the 2,000 odd kilometres. We took one photograph every 10 kilometres. And published this as a result, so there is a sort of
the documentation of
the road conditions, of the whole road.
Yeah, that's really good.
Wow.
And, but as you know, because if you have a dirt road with no construction, it soon gets rutted and it soon gets corrugated. So you then drive on the side. You drive on the side of that.
They expand and eventually they merge and twist.
It's 5 kilometres wide, and if you come to a Y junction in a 5 kilometre wide road, you don't know. And I have there are almost no road signs. I did take a photograph of the only road sign I saw in the centre of Mongolia, which was unique in road signs, and it had 3 arrows and the same name on all 3 directions.
In all directions.
And it had the latitude and longitude printed on it, it was wrong.
Oh, it's wrong. That's interesting.
Amazing.
I think I haven't spoken to anyone who's been through Mongolia recently, but we were there 2012, and the Chinese are certainly investing a lot of money in building a road network, which is a shame, really, but that is an incredible country. And we were there towards the end of summer, and the weather was just starting to change, but the landscape there is incredible, and the weather can change at the drop of a hat. Were there any times you found yourselves in kind of tricky situations because the weather had changed and rivers had risen?
No, we were very lucky. We had almost no real problem. I mean, there were a few rivers to cross, but nothing out of that, and we had sunshine and nice weather, and we'd gone, the road which seemed to be the least likely to be flooded. And people got stuck in sort of sand and things, but we didn't have any major problems. We got to Ulaanbaatar. One member of our group, because we'd set out with a group, one member of our group had to turn back in Turkey. She eventually took the Mongolian Express and joined us in there, because as you know, all the Stan's visas, I don't know if they're still like it, but certainly then they were all terribly interlocked. You had to get them in the UK. They specified your entry and exit date, and you could easily get yourself into a mess. Anyway, she had her passport stolen in Turkey, so
no choice.
No choice. So she had to give up and go back without a passport in Turkey.
You did empty the whole van.
Oh yes, yes.
Everything
She said she
it.
didn't know whether she'd lost it or it's stolen. So in the end, everybody makes a partial search of the van. In the end, we all got together and we took everything out of the vehicle.
The whole of the content out.
Spread. And it wasn't there.
One
they
try.
had to turn around.
And then how were the border crossings back then? If you're crossing into Mongolia and you're the second person to come through that border, how were you welcomed? I should imagine.
Well, no, it was very businesslike. We at that point we still didn't know that Ewan McGregor had just been through there. No, they were. The Russian side were a bit thing. They said you can't go into Mongolia, so there's no point in going beyond here. And we waved our Mongolian piece of paper and said, well, we want to try. They were a bit iffy, because luckily we did have multiple entry visas for Russia at that point. Because we'd set up a company to do tours in Mongolia, so we had business visas.
We did the same.
We invented companies actually, didn't
we?
A fictional company.
We had letterhead. Basically, we were going to do tours in Mongolia. And this was a sort of training trip, which saves us, lots of hassle. So we could have gone back, but they were a bit of hassle. But no, they weren't. One person's van they searched rather more thoroughly than normal. But no, they didn't seem. It was quite smooth.
Because we exited Mongolia through that same border crossing, and one of the guys was looking for our car, and he was very stern, and he pulled out some stuff out the door panel in the car. He looked at it, looked at me, looked back at it, and he went, "James Bond."
Did he?
I know, it's just hilarious. And then just that one little joke was enough to
relax the whole situation.
The whole situation. Because up until that point, it was a bit tense because
It's intimidating, isn't it? Borders, the uniforms and just the whole demeanour. It's quite intimidating.
And it had been quite tense because they had been asking us, they were medicines, and we weren't sure whether they were looking for something illegal or
they wanted.
And actually, the guy wanted something for.
He was really rude, and he was saying,
really
medicine, give me medicine. And he had a wart on his finger, that's what he wanted, so I gave him laxatives, and I said, take 4 of those, they'll sort your wart out.
No.
So, I don't know what happened to
back through the border.
We haven't been back since.
So I think he got his comeuppance for that.
We had trouble with police, didn't we, in Quebec, actually, the only time more recently. And yes, the policeman wasn't interested and he called for backup. He was not happy about us.
Oh, really? Called for backup.
Backup. He stopped us, asked for our papers. He wound down the window, he gave him the papers. He sat there on his computer.
Yeah.
you couldn't make head and tail of this. So he called for backup,
And
this
very nice young female
police came down, and she looked at the map, and we talked about it.
We
We
were
sat
okay,
there, and eventually he just wound down the window and shoved the papers back to her.
And if you get somebody who's interested in travel, or you think, wow, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Or just thinks you're crazy.
Yeah,
and just is like,
And
you go.
often, actually, when you're in those situations and you get stopped by the police, and they are after bribes, not necessarily in that particular case you just described, but it is quite fun sometimes just to change the subject completely and start talking about something completely different, and that quite often diffuses the situation. And then, you know, I always find it interesting, people's different techniques with dealing with the police.
In your present in Uzbekistan, you know, they stop you and fill in this huge dusty ledger.
Yeah.
We got 18 in one day. This was our record. And we had a printout of all the information. Every time they asked for grandmother's occupation, we would add it to the end of our list, you see, and then print out. So you'd hand them this great big Excel spreadsheet with everybody, all the information anybody in the world had ever asked for about anybody. And we'd stop at the end of each day, add it to it, and print it out again for the next
Which
day.
country was that?
Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
There must be a very large room somewhere full of lots of these ledgers,
And of course they have to transcribe it
Yeah.
phonetically into Cyrillic.
Yes.
It's these kind of archaic systems, but
That still exists.
they still exist, but they do work. We
In India.
when we came through India, we were up in
Meghalaya and Manipur in the
northeastern
northeastern
India.
states.
And there was a lot of that because I think there's quite a lot of tension up there at the moment. There's some trouble, so they want to keep a track of certainly Westerners
Particular
travelling through there.
foreigners.
And we were amazed because we got to one checkpoint and something we'd filled in a massive ledger 2 days ago. The information was there on this fella's table. He had the information.
He knew we were coming.
He knew we
He
were
had
coming.
an actual copy of it.
He was like, I knew you were coming. Hello.
Wow.
the systems actually work.
Yeah, yes.
So we were pretty amazed at that. Okay, so that's interesting. So you obviously don't have the Unimog anymore.
No,
so we're sat in this incredible. It's a Bimobil.
It's a Bimobil, German, manufactured on an MAN chassis.
Yeah.
I eventually, after I took the Unimog into Central America and then down into South America, and that was a sort of 14-month trip, and came back, and then I decided to sell it because now you want to build one, put right all the things you got wrong in the first one.
Yeah.
And I did sell it, and I sold it to some Spanish lads, and I said, this vehicle is knackered, it's just finished 14 months, it was already old, it needs a new this and a new that, do not. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, about 10 days after they bought it, I got an email from them in Africa saying everything's going fine. And they certainly didn't have time to do any of the things.
They just
They just went.
But often that's the way. It's sometimes if you encounter a problem, deal with it when it happens.
And I was going to build another one, and then this one came on the market, and it was at too good a price to miss. So
Second hand.
Second hand, yeah.
Some people have a real personal connection with their vehicles. I was chatting to Paul Crittenden earlier, and he's like, I have this vehicle. He said it's a money pit. I'm gonna have to put loads of money into it, but I can't part with it. Like, and
It's your baby.
We
It
have
is.
it.
No, I think it is.
We have a really similar connection to our vehicle. We've been through so much. It's weird because I know it's just a big lump of metal.
It's a
but
member
I've
of the
got,
team,
yeah,
isn't it?
I've
And
got-
it's the two of
so
you.
long in it as well.
Yeah, the sentimental attachment is huge.
Well, it's a home, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and your transport and your safety, your security is everything.
So then, in this vehicle, what trips have you undertaken in this
In
vehicle?
this
then?
vehicle, we shipped this into Brisbane and then spent 10 months going around Australia.
Well, we started in Iceland, didn't
We-
we?
oh, yeah,
For
we
a
did
quick trial trip.
Trial
Okay.
trips
How
in
was Iceland? So you did.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
It's
it's
on our
somewhere.
list.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely on our radar.
Amazing. It was really beautiful. And I was very worried. This was my first adventure. I mean,
Okay.
I travelled a lot, I'd lived abroad a lot, but this was my first adventure.
Overland
And
trip.
I knew it wasn't going to be very great, perhaps, and it could rain a lot, and I had no idea, but it was amazing just to be in the nothingness of this grey landscape. And it was,
wilderness is just beautiful, isn't it?
You don't know until
and it's the only way to see it,
whether you
to
like
travel
it or
like
not.
this. You're absolutely correct. When you leave, no matter how much preparation you do, and you think you'll love it, until you've actually been on the road and lived this lifestyle, you just don't know if you're going to get on with it or not.
And
but
we
obviously, it clearly
we
suited
headed
you.
for quite a few lighthouses with the wind and the waves and just nothing.
So it was just it was a trip to Iceland and then back, sort of a trial run.
Yeah, I mean, I was still working at the time, so I flew in. Stephen had to do the drive because you used to be able to get the they could ferry from
You
Scotland.
could get a go from Scotland,
but
but
now
by then you
to
had to go through Denmark and ship across.
Yeah.
Right.
So I
And
think
it was
I
getting
did
more
5
difficult and more expensive.
Yes, I think it is quite expensive.
Yeah, it's
we were
really
discussing
expensive.
And
it
book a year in
recently.
advance. It's
So it was a quick.
Wow.
It was a quick tour of 5 weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we, circumnavigated, and you went
And
through the
crisscrossed
middle
a few
when I flew
times,
back.
yes.
But it was
Yeah.
enough to fall in love with the
Absolutely.
lifestyle. Great.
Yeah.
And as far as the landscape goes, was it unique to Iceland? Have you
Yeah.
experienced anything like
No,
that
no.
What
anywhere
about
else?
New Zealand? Is it not a bit?
Well,
similar?
bits of the volcano, but
Size?
you know, there are the central Iceland is desert. It just happens to be black volcanic ash instead
Yeah.
of and seriously four-wheel drive. I mean, their roads are categorised as ordinary, four-wheel drive, and super four-wheel drive. And this is only just super four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
You have to have wheels above a certain height. And in Reykjavik, in the car parks of the supermarket, you see these vehicles with balloon tyres and things. And,
That's it. One of my fascinations is with Iceland, and just because I'd seen images of just such unique landscapes.
Absolutely.
And I think getting out there and exploring the world and seeing this this particular style or way of travelling is the only way you can do that.
It is. And we were parked up by geezers. We were parked up by smoking landscape. It was just
I mean,
so cool.
Some bits of Iceland, they have a beautiful sort of attitude to sort of health and safety. You get a lava field that is actually still flowing, and the grass is catching fire and things. And there's a sign that says, "Do not walk on the red bits."
Yes, no ropes or anything.
Sounds quite sensible.
Definitely. But I swam in the crater of Askja, the volcano, which, fun enough, it's enormous. Stephen didn't come in the water with me, strangely. He encouraged me to scramble down, which I did. You did join me eventually, didn't you? And it's a huge crater, milky and warm, obviously. And we've got an amazing picture of me just being... I mean, I was, again, a bit mad to do this, but...
It did erupt in, I think, 1980 something. And it's of unknown depth. It is basically a volcanic crater full of water.
Right.
Yeah,
but that was surreal to do that.
Yeah, we've witnessed one of those. You can sit on the edge of it and it kind of drops away underneath. Where was that? Yeah, that was in Iran. Yeah, that was incredible.
So that was my highlight of the trip, I think, really.
Yeah.
Iceland.
Well, the swimming in the crater.
And that,
and yes, Iceland.
Totally unique.
The wonderful waterfalls. And
I mean, you could park right under really beautiful. And the Icelanders appreciate people travelling around. So every little village will have a parking area, often with hot water coming out of the ground, because it's there.
It just does.
So there is a campsite in the middle. You've got this black volcanic ash desert. And then if you imagine you went to the garden centre and bought a lot of strips of turf and laid them down, stuck a kitchen sink in the middle with a hot tap. That's it.
That was it.
Really?
On the vehicles you park round the strip, but the tents go on this strip of turf.
Hot water.
And there's one sink with boiling water coming out.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Iceland is just sounding more and more appealing.
Oh, it is.
It
is beautiful.
The only downside of Iceland is the weather can be truly appalling. So you need to allow for 2 weeks of rain. So you need 6 weeks or something to do it.
But if you do birds, you like birds. Puffins.
Oh,
Puffins.
yes, I bet the bird life is amazing, the wildlife.
It was.
And
whales.
Yeah, and you found that every little village has a museum of something.
Oh, we love that, don't
we?
Weird
quirky
museums.
They can't possibly and you go into this, which is usually somebody's back shed, and it is amazing what they have got.
They've just kept it, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, including, there was one with several aircraft.
Wow, that's cool.
Basically, there was some Russian aircraft that had landed somewhere in Iceland and they couldn't take off. So this museum had dragged it And the front nose cone of some quite large airliner, where you pose with your saw as though you've just sawed it off.
Well, there was a saw around.
Yes, they left the saw.
Cut the nose off an aeroplane.
Amazing.
Surreal.
We love stuff like that, don't we?
We found
museums.
some really weird museums.
Museum of matchboxes.
Yeah.
Museum.
The erotic waxwork museum was interesting.
We know the phallic museum, of course. There's that.
And there was one particular town in Hungary, right?
Hungary.
And it had about 8 or 9 really odd museums. Really weird. There was one where a woman had made a model of the Hungarian Houses of Parliament out of shells.
Right.
Like hundreds of thousands of tiny snail shells, a perfect scale model of the Hungarian
Just
Parliament.
very
just
bizarre
really
little
bizarre
museums.
stuff like that. We love that, don't we?
Yeah, we found some good ones.
We had a wonderful museum of the herring industry, which was very informative.
Oh,
Obviously.
wow.
Yeah, because
That's
that's how
quite
they
cool.
made their money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Big time, not so much now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It was a really good experience. So that's what set us off to Australia.
Yeah.
didn't it?
Yeah.
What set me off.
Yeah.
And then, had you
Your
travelled
test.
to Australia before?
I
or-
lived in Sydney for 3 years.
Ah,
so-
okay. Yeah.
But like whenever you live anywhere, you live there, and you don't really see
That's
it
right.
if you're busy living.
Yeah.
So yeah, we started in Brisbane.
Went round.
10 months.
Yeah.
That's a long.
Went
That's
round
a
and
good
backwards.
trip.
We
But we did have trouble getting the van in a bit originally,
Oh,
didn't
yes.
we? Because you knew the rules and they didn't.
yes. Well,
Which
I
is
mean,
typical.
the 2 stages to it. One is if you import a vehicle, it has to be clean as
Oh,
new.
yeah.
And they literally get off at the far end and put their white gloves on and get in the pit and run their hand around underneath. And if it doesn't come off white, you will go and get it cleaned over
Again.
there by that company at your expense.
Yeah.
And no, you will not drive it 100 metres from here to there. You will hire a low loader,
Wow.
take it there, and then you will hire a low loader to the back, and then I will continue with my inspection.
So
Yeah,
extreme.
we've heard a lot of stories, and for us, there's
It's
just
a
no
shame, it
chance
really
of
puts
we can
you
get our
off.
vehicle
Yeah.
there.
Well,
no chance.
Well, I read the best guide to how to do it was the Australian Army description for bringing vehicles back, and for small vehicles, Land Rovers, etc., it said scrap.
Oh, really?
That was the instruction.
Wow.
Don't clean. I mean, for tank transporters, it tells
That's
you how to
nuts.
clean them. For Land Rover, Land
Yeah.
Cruiser style vehicles, it
Just
says scrap.
Wow.
But you were thorough to the nth
Yeah, I mean,
degree,
I-
and still they failed us.
Yes, I mean, I not only
So
did I
annoying.
spend, I've forgotten how many hours, but I did document it. I actually documented the cleaning of it. So, for example, in here, apart from cleaning everything, you then have to fumigate it with the right fumigation.
Right.
Yeah.
And through all the bits and pieces. And your windscreen washer bottle must be emptied, filled with water containing chlorine at this concentration for 4 hours, and then emptied again.
Unbelievable.
And so on.
Yeah.
And so I documented all of this. And anything you have as equipment, say chocks or a tow rope, that might have stood on the floor has to be cleaned. And so you clean it, you shrink, wrap it in cling film, put a label on it saying it's been cleaned with this chemical and things.
Yeah.
And I handed the book in, when we arrived. We got failed once for underneath. Friends of ours who'd taken their vehicle got failed. I think either 4 times it took them 6 weeks, or 6 times it took them 4 weeks. And the irony is, after they eventually got it into the country, this was the people we'd travelled with in South America, they had their vehicle modified to increase the departure angle a bit. And anyway, when they cut bits of the chassis off, South American sand poured out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's absolutely no way on earth our vehicle will ever pass that inspection ever. Okay, so a big lap of Australia, in and out and around, and then
10 months,
10 months, and then from there.
Oh well, we have to have always one story. We had to go to. We went into the centre of Australia to which Birdsville, where they have the second most important race. Horse race.
Yeah, horse race. After the Melbourne races.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody goes to Birdsville. Normally has a population of a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
And it has a pub, a famous pub in the middle, and they hold this horse race once a year.
Yeah, pub on the petrol station. That's all it has.
Yeah.
And I think 5,000 people descend on Birdsville for this race, and they're all packaged. They come in coaches under the campsite, sort of glamping and all this sort of stuff. And in the 120 odd years they've done this, they've always had it. Anyway, the year we were there, it rained. And it rained sufficiently heavily to block all the roads and to stop them racing. And everybody was stuck there.
Yeah, for a week.
Wow!
And the only road out of town was the one which went into the Simpson Desert, and we went down there, and I have a photograph of the Simpson Desert sign underwater.
Yeah, because we were going to drive.
That way. The road into the Simpson Desert was waterlogged.
Yeah.
But back in Birdsville, there are people who are who need to be back at work. Everybody packaged to come for 3 days or 2 days. And the place ran out of food.
Yeah, of course.
But most importantly, ran out of cigarettes. So they were auctioning packs of cigarettes for charity. And I think $300 Australian was paid for a package of cigarettes.
But they did have beer, didn't they?
They did. Luckily, they had beer.
It's Australia.
Tons of it.
And
they were throwing their cans
thirsty.
down like water running down the streets, literally.
Yeah, this is a tradition there. There are special lager, Birdsville lager cans produced for this, and you just throw them on the ground. The whole street is full of
as you said, it's the people you meet. Things had gone wrong, and we saw Aussies at play big time.
Yeah.
Really.
I bet.
Yeah,
it was good fun, wasn't it?
No horse racing, but they did do coach pushing.
Yeah.
There
was entertainment.
They bet on anything, and they really did.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah, we'll have to. I'm fully aware at the beginning of this you were saying, an hour, that's a terribly long time, but we are actually
time flies when you start
approaching an hour, and
wow.
I could happily sit and chat for another hour, but I think we'll have to start slowly tying it up, which is a real shame because I'm sure we've missed lots of countries and adventures.
Well, the Arctic Ocean was good, wasn't it? But
Then we went to Canada.
And Alaska,
Alaska.
Yeah, we drove up to the Arctic Ocean, Prudhoe Bay.
Wow, so that's also on our
And any animal encounters up that neck of the woods?
Polar bear. Well, no, that's Hudson Bay.
That was Hudson Bay on the way back.
Yeah,
you're in something a bit more stable than us as well.
No, we were on foot.
Oh, were you really? Oh my
with a guide, without anything.
Yes, you can't actually get to Hudson Bay by road. You have to take a train.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Stephen took the photo. I was running in the opposite direction.
Wow.
That's really, really interesting. That's cool.
Highlight again.
Highlights. Wow, it's been absolutely fantastic listening to you guys. Do you have a website where people can read more about your adventures?
Well, there's a Silk Route website, www.silkroute.org.uk.
Yeah.
There are links to there to my personal websites and to many of the other Silk Route members.
And the name of your personal website
is xor.org.uk. XOR.
XOR. Okay. So people can find you there.
It's a geek computer term.
Okay, well, it's been absolutely fantastic. I could sit here and happily talk with you all night, and it's a shame we can't do that. But we really do have to wrap it up. So thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to everything you've got to say, and for us, it's still inspirational. We meet people who've done some amazing trips, and every person we meet inspires us a little bit more to go out and do another trip. So
and the people listening to this also.
Yeah.
I think some of those stories and destinations are just truly inspirational. So
yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Wow, what a great conversation. We could have sat and listened to Stephen's stories for hours. If you enjoyed that, please subscribe and review us on iTunes by searching The Overland Podcast, and please check out our website www.theoverlandingpodcast.com. Where you'll find supporting information, photos and links to the wonderful people we speak to. We'd love to engage with our listeners, so please find us on Facebook /The Overlanding Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please share it with your friends and help spread the word. I can promise that next week's conversation will be equally as interesting, but completely different. So please again, subscribe on iTunes so that you'll get the latest episodes straight onto your laptop, phone, iPad, etc. If you're an overlander yourself and have an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. We'd especially like to hear from cyclists and motorcyclists who have undertaken longer trips. You can email us at aroundtheworldin800days@mail.com, subject heading podcast interview. You can also find more information about myself and my wife Emma at aroundtheworldin800days.com. Okay, so that's it for now. Goodbye, and don't forget, the world isn't as scary as we're told.